Have you ever been in a moment where one small decision could change your entire life? Imagine you are in an isolated place, deep in the woods, with no one to call for help, no phone signal, just you and the eerie silence of the wilderness. Outside, a terrible blizzard rages. The wind howls in invisible screams through every door, every wall. The temperature drops to the point where even the smallest mistake could be fatal. And then, you hear a noise. It's not the wind. It's not the snow. It's something or someone right outside the door. You stand there, your heart pounding. It's that moment when every survival instinct screams, "Don't open the door." But a tiny voice in the back of your mind whispers, "What if it's a cry for help?" So, what will you do? Do you dare to open that door? Because sometimes, the doors we open are not just to welcome something from the outside, but to face our deepest fears. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you, where did you find this story? And if you want to wait for stories that touch the depths of your heart, click subscribe to the channel now. Because tomorrow, I will tell you a special story that can change the way you look at life forever. New York is the city that never sleeps. The towering skyscrapers, the endless traffic, and the fast pace of life that waits for no one. Jack Baker loved it all. As an adventure journalist, he had crossed the Amazon rainforest, traveled deep into the world's driest deserts, and even faced the fiercest sandstorms in the Sahara. But the one thing he had never overcome was himself. After more than 2 decades of living in the raging waves of news, adrenaline-filled chases, and countless sleepless nights at the keyboard, Jack suddenly felt empty. No more excitement, no more passion. Only one question echoed in his mind. Am I living or just existing? And that was why he left. Montana is a wild land where the sky stretches endlessly and the snow covers the old forests. Jack bought an old wooden house where there were no neighbors, no honking cars, and no sensational flash news on the phone screen. Just him, nature, and silence. But nature is not as gentle as we think. The first night the snowstorm hit, Jack began to realize that the peace he was looking for was not easy. The wind howled like the wail of lost souls, and his small house trembled under the terrible power of nature. Outside, the temperature had dropped to -40 degrees Celsius, a number that could kill any creature after just a few hours of exposure. Jack pulled his sheepskin coat tighter, his hands trembling as he threw more wood into the fire. The cold seeped through every crack in the wooden house, penetrating to the marrow of his bones. He had written about people fighting nature to survive, but now he truly felt his fragility. In the darkness, there was only the flickering of the fire. There was no Wi-Fi, no phone, no car horns, just his breathing and the howling wind outside. Was he ready for this? Did he want to face himself? Or was it all just a stupid romantic dream? And then, in the middle of the crazy storm, a sound rang out. Knock, knock. Jack froze. It couldn't be. Who could be knocking on his door in this desolate place, in the middle of a deadly storm? Was it someone or something else? Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you were ready, but in reality, you weren't? Have you ever left everything behind to search for something deep inside, only to find that the real test was just beginning? If you were Jack Baker, would you dare open that door? The old wooden door was still closed, but the strange sound echoed through the raging snowstorm. Knock, knock. Not the rapid knocking of a human, nor the scratching of a predator. It was a sound both unfamiliar and suspicious, like the sigh of nature knocking on Jack Baker's soul, forcing him to face something he was not ready for. Jack walked slowly toward the door, his hand tightening on the old flashlight, his thumb trembling against the cold latch. Could it be someone lost? A wanderer? Or just the wind? Hundreds of theories flashed through his mind in an instant. But when the door cracked open and the dim light from the flashlight swept across the thick snow, Jack was stunned. Not people, not predators, but a family of bears, a mother bear, her dark brown fur covered in frost, her eyes glassy with exhaustion, stood precariously on the porch. Her legs trembled, her labored breaths rising in thin wisps in the cold air. Her two tiny cubs huddled close to her, shivering, their fur matted in wet patches from the melting snow. They did not growl, did not attack, and did not show any of the feral instincts that bears have. Just a small family fighting to survive. Jack stood frozen. In the oppressive storm silence, his heart was pounding so hard he could hear it. What should I do? He wondered. His mind was filled with warnings about the dangers of wild bears and safety rules for living near the woods. Never let wild animals get too close. But that rationality was quickly swept away by a simpler truth. They were scared. They needed help. Jack looked into the mother bear's eyes, not those of a predator, but of a mother pleading. He took a deep breath, closed the door, and leaned back against it. His heart was pounding. If I open the door, I might die. But if I don't do anything, they will die. What would you do in that situation? When you had to choose between your safety and compassion for another life, would you have the courage to break the rules? Not letting fear paralyze you for too long, Jack took action. He prepared a spare room next to the kitchen, a small, well-insulated space where he'd intended to store his camping gear. He put in a few old blankets, some water, and some food. Not for humans, but for unwanted guests who couldn't be turned away. When he opened the door again, Jack didn't move closer. He just backed away, keeping a safe distance, and left the door ajar. The mother bear hesitated. She smelled humans, the scent of potential danger. But then, her maternal instincts were stronger than her fear. She dragged her heavy steps, pushing her two cubs into the house, her eyes still fixed on Jack, a gaze that was both grateful and wary. The door closed behind them. Jack sat down on the floor, his back against the wooden door, and let out a long breath. He didn't know if he had just done the craziest thing or the bravest thing of his life. But one thing he was sure of, it was the moment he felt truly alive. Have you ever been faced with a decision where your mind said, no, but your heart whispered, do it? Would you choose safety or compassion? The small room shook slightly as the storm outside continued to howl like invisible monsters. Jack sat on the cold wooden floor, his back against the door that had just closed behind his three special guests, a mother bear and her two cubs. His heart was still pounding, not because of the bitter cold, but because of something even stronger, fear. Fear that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Fear that even a moment of carelessness would cause this fragile door to not be enough to stop the mother bear's wild instincts. But beneath that layer of fear, there was another feeling lurking. Something that Jack had long since lost in the fast pace of urban life, true compassion. Jack did not sleep that night. He sat on guard, listening to every sound coming from the room next door. the heavy breathing of the mother bear, the faint moans of the two cubs trying to find warmth from their mother's cold body. No growls, no smashing, just the silence of living beings fighting to survive. Have you ever felt like this? When fear and compassion battle in your mind, bit by bit, as if you were on the brink of a decision with no return? Will you choose to protect yourself or take the risk for something bigger than yourself? Day 1. As the first pale morning light crept through the cracks in the windows, Jack decided to do what he hadn't dared to do the night before: check on the bear family. He opened the door a crack, as carefully as someone defusing a time bomb. The mother bear lay curled up in the corner, her two cubs nestled against her belly, eyes half closed and tired. The mother bear's dark brown eyes met Jack's. Not the fierce or wary look he had imagined, but one of utter exhaustion mixed with a flicker of fragile trust. Jack gently placed a bowl of water and some food near the door. He didn't dare to move closer, just stepped back and closed the door, letting the distance keep them both safe. But deep down he knew he had just taken another step on the fragile bridge between survival instinct and compassion. The second day. The storm had not stopped. Snow continued to fall heavily, covering everything outside in white. Jack began to get used to the silent presence of the bear family. He no longer heard the heavy breathing as before, but his anxiety had never lessened. This time, when he opened the door to check, he saw that the mother bear had stood up, slowly approaching the empty bowl of water. The two cubs followed, weak but hopeful. Jack suddenly realized something simple but profound. In the wild, life is more than instinct. It is interdependence, the fragile moments between life and death, when sometimes just an outstretched hand is enough to save a life. Have you ever witnessed a look of help? Not from a human, but from a creature that cannot speak, only knows how to look at you as if you are its last chance? What would you do if you became the one holding that chance? Day 3. The storm finally passed, leaving behind a gray sky and a snow-covered forest. Jack knew it was time. The bear family could not stay here forever, and he could not maintain this connection in such a small space. When Jack opened the door for the last time, he did not leave a bowl of water or food. Instead, he just stood there, not hiding his presence. The mother bear looked at him for a long moment, a look that would be etched into Jack's mind forever. Not fear, nor gratitude, but a silent understanding. The mother bear turned, leading her two cubs out of the room, across the snowy yard, and then gradually disappeared into the vast forest. Jack stood there for a long time, watching the small footprints gradually erased by the last cold wind of winter. And then there was only silence. But it was no longer the terrifying silence of the first night. It was the silence of a heart that had just found its truest beat. Jack realized that sometimes the craziest decisions are the ones that make us feel truly alive. Have you ever done something that went against all the rules, just because you knew it was the right thing to do? If you were in Jack's situation, would you dare to open that door? The snowstorm finally receded, leaving behind a scene that was both quiet and strangely desolate. The pale winter sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the thick blanket of snow that covered the vast expanse of Montana. The world had suddenly become too quiet, but it was no longer the quiet of loneliness, but the meaningful quiet after a storm. Jack stood before the door of the small room where the bear family had been sheltering for the past 3 days. His hand lightly touched the doorknob, and a strange feeling rose in his heart. Not just relief that everyone was safe, but also an unnamed sadness. He knew that this moment was more than just opening a physical door. It was the moment he opened the door to maturity, courage, and a deep awakening within his soul. The door opened as gently as a wordless farewell. Mother Bear slowly stood up. The dark brown fur was dry now, the frost melting to reveal the rough skin of resilience. The two cubs nestled against their mother, their eyes brighter, more sparkling. Eyes that had once held fear, now replaced with hope. There was no growl, no panic. There was just one last look from the mother bear. One that would sear Jack's mind forever. It was not a look of gratitude as humans usually exchange. It was an acknowledgement that whether human or beast, in life's storms, we all need each other. Not to possess or control, but to remind each other that this life is inherently woven with invisible threads of connection. Have you ever experienced a moment like that? A moment where just a look, a small gesture, is enough to make you realize that we are not alone in this world? Jack stepped out onto the porch, watching the bear family's footprints disappear into the snow-covered forest. The footprints were not just imprinted on the ground, but also engraved in his heart, proof of something he had never truly understood. To survive, humans need more than air to breathe, food to survive, or a roof over their heads. We need a connection. Moments that remind us that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. In his years as a journalist, Jack thought he had seen all the most touching stories, tragedies, and miracles of humanity. But it turned out that the greatest lesson of his life came from three wild creatures in a small cabin in the middle of a Montana snowstorm. He realized that survival is not just about surviving challenges. Sometimes, survival is about opening up to the things we fear most. It is daring to break through the limits, to break through the barriers we build to protect ourselves, only to find something simple but extremely important: compassion. Have you ever wondered what defines your life? Not the great achievements or the glorious moments, but the small moments when you face your fear and still choose love. If you were Jack Baker, would you dare to open that door? And if life gave you a similar moment, would you dare to choose compassion over fear? Sometimes the most important doors are not the ones you open to enter a certain place, but the doors you open to let the world into your heart. Life can sometimes feel like a blizzard, cold, harsh, and challenging. We build invisible doors to protect ourselves from hurt, fear, and the unknown. But have you ever wondered, are those doors keeping you safe? Or are they locking you away from the truly meaningful moments of life? The story of Jack Baker and his family of bears is more than just a chance encounter between man and nature. It is a journey of courage over fear, compassion, overcoming cold reason, and above all, a reminder that true connection does not need words to survive. Jack did not just save a family of bears. He saved himself from loneliness, from the invisible wounds that a busy life leaves behind. Because sometimes, to feel that we are truly alive, we don't need to conquer majestic peaks, but just dare to open our hearts to a small creature in need of help. Do you feel that? Have you ever stood in front of a door of your own, wondering between staying safe in your comfort zone or stepping into something uncertain but meaningful? If this story touches your heart, don't forget to spread this positive emotion to more people. Please share it with your friends and family, because who knows, someone might need to hear this story to find light in their life. And I want to know how you feel. How many points do you rate this story from 0 to 10? Don't hesitate to leave a comment. I want to hear your honest thoughts. But wait, the story doesn't end here. If you think this is the only story that touched you, stay tuned for the next stories, where profound lessons are hidden in the most ordinary situations. Click on the next video to explore other stories with me, where every moment can change the way you see this life. Because sometimes, just a small story can light up a heart.